I'm Batman.
Who are you?
My name is
Bond.
I'm
Batman.
name's Bond.
James Bond.
I'm Batman.
Bond. James Bond.
I'm Batman.
I'm Batman.
This is the Batman vs. James Bond show. The show covering everything related to Batman and James Bond movies. And now, here's your host, Brian Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an all-new episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. I am your host, Brian Thomas. Thanks for joining me. This is the show where we talk about everything related to Batman and James Bond news. For all of you that have joined me since episode 1, you know who you are. Thank you. And for all you newbies out there, all you Batman and James Bond virgins out there, welcome. This is nothing but a Batman and James Bond movie related. We talk about some comics here and there, but I stick strictly to movies because that's what I know and what I love. Anywho, I hope you all had a great week. Lots and lots to get to today, tonight, whenever you're listening to this. Lots of little news bits dropped, and let's just hop right into some news and just go right with it. So, the first bit of news that we have this week is Ben Affleck, Batman. If some of you still call him Daredevil, shame on you. Ben Affleck is now an executive producer on the Justice League. That's right. Ben Affleck, who is already starring in the Zack Snyder-directed Justice League films as Batman, will now act as an executive producer on Warner Brothers' currently in production DC blockbuster. This has been confirmed once again by The Hollywood Reporter. So, what does this mean? Well, in a way, it means that, Ben Affleck is going to have more, as they say, a creative voice in the movie-making process. So he's going to be working with the screenwriter, Chris Terrio. He was the one who wrote Argo. He helped write Batman v Superman. They're going to be kind of fine-tuning the script, if you will. He's going to have more of a voice or input in post-production process and all kinds of things, according to sources. So what are my thoughts on this? Well, I'm excited. I'm very much excited. I always say, it always comes back to this. How did I feel about Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice? Well, I said it was in the middle of the road. I don't know if it was so much the writing. It was how the story was told. The editing was so choppy and so forth. Go back and listen to my full Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice review. But what I'm going with on this is who is to blame for that, or at least in my mind, who is to blame. I know there's, lots of fans out there that say that, this film was almost near perfect. It was the best Batman film, best Batman v Superman possibility we could have had. That's a matter of opinion, as I always say. Zack Snyder makes me nervous right about now. And the reason for that is that, we have this, and like I said, he has this director's cut that's supposed to be coming out sometime this fall, possibly in July or August. They haven't given a release date for it yet. And what makes me nervous about that is when, he promises that there's more footage that adds to making, his film that he already had better. And when I think about that, I'm like, well, you should have been able to just cram it all into 2.5 hours. And 2.5 hours is a very long time for a movie. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I have trouble just sitting still for any longer than a 2.5 hour movie. I mean, either I run out of popcorn or I've drank so much soda that I have to go take a potty break, or it just loses my attention unless the story is, just keeps me in that focused. So, when I said about like the editing and storytelling, I believe in Ben Affleck because he's worked with Chris Terrio before. They know how to tell a good story. I keep coming back to it. Argo, great movie. Go check that out. If you want to see what Ben Affleck can do with action, go see The Town. He also helped, I believe he was obviously the director of that, but he also was a producer on that. I'm sure he had a hand in writing. Make note, he is also an Oscar-winning writer. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Yes, he knows how to write. So when it comes to storytelling, I have no doubt, I have nothing but faith in him that he knows how to fine-tune the script. The script's already been written, but who's to say that it can't be improved upon? I'm not saying that maybe it's great. No one knows what this Justice League script is, and it could be really, really good. It could be really, really bad. I mean, I have no idea. And, it never hurts to have how does John Campea say that's the guy who I look up to. He said it never hurts to recruit talent. Well, Ben Affleck was already in there as Batman, and he's pretty much the main star of the Justice League. So the talent's there. It's just kind of like when you have kind of like the main fighter, like, or let me think if I can do better than that. You have that main baseball player or football player who's just kind of waiting on the sideline, sitting on the bench, and, he's just like, come on, put me in, coach, I'm ready to play. Yes, I know that's a song. But, yeah, so if they put him in there and they use him, this would be great. Another reason Warner Brothers, or at least my thoughts are why Warner Brothers did this, is the backlash and the amount of money that Batman v Superman made. Let's face it, it didn't make the box office that the studio and the fans were probably hoping for. It last time I checked, it was in the 700 millions ballpark. It did not cross $1 billion, and that's, of course, when you have two big names like this, Batman and Superman, of course you're going to think that it's going to attract a bigger crowd. I'm not saying that it didn't attract a big crowd. I'm just saying that it didn't make the amount of money that they had wanted. I think the way, at least from a studio point of view, the way I'm looking at it is Zack Snyder has directed two DC Universe, or DCEU, whatever you want to call it. He's directed two of those franchise movies, and the reception has only been at least in the high 50 percentile, if you will. The percentage, or the overall ratings, and while I hate saying about the critics, the overall ratings were in between, let's face it. And the box office wasn't as big a draw as, say, and you guessed it already, the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. It is competition. It shouldn't have to be competition, but it is. So when they go back and look at this, they're like, okay, well, obviously, if a rated R movie such as Deadpool, and that's in 20th Century Fox Studios, if a rated R movie can make more money than our PG-13 with even bigger comic book superheroes that are the top tier, then obviously something's going on. Something needs to be done about this, because we can't just, I think they're too far in the process to reboot. I really do. They're already filming Justice League. That's where they are right about now with this. If they stop that, and if they just fired Zack Snyder, then how's that going to look as them not having faith in him? I'm not saying that they have lost faith. I'm just saying that, you have to have a little bit of support. It never hurts to have a little bit of support. So by having Ben Affleck in there, it can mean one of two things. As the news reported, yeah, sure, they're going to have him as, kind of doing some tweaks here and there. He's going to have more of an input. If you're an executive producer like say, Christopher Nolan was on Batman v Superman, you're just going to kind of have your name in there in the end credits, and you'll just be like, oh, yeah, that's good. Just go ahead and do that. Mail me my check. Honestly, I don't think that's what Ben Affleck wants to do. I think he's just eager to get involved, and he has his own Batcave. So, and apparently he's a big comic book fan. So I think like I said, I have lots and lots of faith in him. Apparently you guys did too. On Twitter, I kind of broadcast this out in a poll, and a lot of people are very much excited about Ben Affleck being involved as an executive producer. I kind of feel bad for Zack Snyder. I mean, because he's a visual director, but I think visually, yeah, he can do what, he can put it on screen, like make it look like a real comic book film and so forth. I think, though, that Ben Affleck, it can be like more help with the script, like I said. So, and nowadays it's actually interesting that you have like all these duos as directors. So you have, say, Russo brothers. You have the guys that directed John Wick. You have the Coen brothers. And I mean, while Snyder and Affleck obviously have no relation, maybe this might be kind of more of a collaboration. And who knows what to make out of this. I mean, I'm very excited, so we will see what happens with that. Now, on to our next news story here. We're sticking here with the Justice League news. It's a rumor, if you will. And, how do I say this? Anybody can go on the internet and broadcast it over social media. If I came up with a news story and just say, hey, the true identity of Batman is Bruce Wayne, sign the Joker, then that would be broadcast all over social media. People would be losing their minds, and it would be, it'd probably make it onto the 6 o'clock news. So when I say a rumor, it means that it hasn't officially been confirmed. It's only a couple sites. One is BatmanNews.com, who I do trust. I go to all the time. This other one is called BirthMoviesDeath.com. Now, according to these two sites, the Justice League movie villain might have already been revealed. I know we talked briefly about this, at least last time I checked. We talked a little bit about how there were some deleted scenes that were leaking immediately after Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice came out. One of them was this scene where Lex Luthor is seen inside the Kryptonian ship. And remember, well, spoiler alert here, if you want to pause it for a second, if you haven't seen the movie, it's been out for almost a month and a half now. So when Lex Luthor's in the Kryptonian ship, he's in the water, he was doing something with General Zod's body, and he asked the ship's computer system to say, tell me about everything. So he's learning about this. And at that same time where he kind of like is trying to, create Doomsday. So in this deleted scene, you see what looks like a SWAT team, and they have like all their laser pointers. They're all in their SWAT attire, and they sneak up on him. But Lex Luthor isn't there. It's actually this like kind of, I don't know how to describe him. He's obviously not human. He's not a human. He possibly some kind of alien form, if you will, and possibly somebody called Steppenwolf. And I'm not talking about the band. Sorry about the musical references tonight. So when the scene leaked, everybody assumed it was this character named Steppenwolf. So I did a little research here. Apparently in the comics, Steppenwolf is the uncle of Darkseid. Darkseid is the one. Remember when Bruce was visiting the gravesite and all of a sudden this like character, just this like almost devilish looking character just kind of popped out of the gravestone. And it was more supposed to be his nightmare. Or was it? We don't know. But it was almost confirmed that was Darkseid. So this guy is the uncle of Darkseid and the military leader of the Apocalypse. He has a cool energy axe and rides an even cooler hoverbike. In the most recent New 52 continuity of DC, Steppenwolf actually sees some action and invades Earth. So what does this mean? It's a rumor. We don't know. I mean, if they're playing, well, they said they're going to do 2 parts of Justice League. We know that much. So you don't want to put in the biggest, baddest villain right away. We know that. So they almost kind of want to have like the number 2 for you James Bond fans out there. Okay, they don't want to put in number 1. They want to put in number 2. So maybe they'll make this guy Steppenwolf. Maybe he's like the number 2 to Darkseid, and maybe Darkseid threatens Earth. Justice League has to come together to fight him and so forth, and then that leads them to Darkseid. I don't know too much. I can't speculate too much more, but I did think it was worth sharing. I would be very interested to see if Jesse Eisenberg does at least make some kind of cameo in there. Given that he did have like this deleted scene. We haven't heard too much about if he's coming back or not. I wouldn't be surprised if he does make at least some kind of cameo. Maybe he's in jail. Maybe this guy, Steppenwolf breaks him out of jail. I have no idea. So let the rumors and speculation continue. But I will still stick with my little, rumor story that the true identity of Batman has been revealed. And I still say it's Bruce Wayne. Anywho, on to our next news story here. So, what I said about late breaking news whenever it feels like breaking, maybe within an hour or two before I started recording, this little news story broke. Now, once again, this is not a rumor. This is actually confirmed by multiple news sources. One of them actually happens to be The Independent out of UK. And what happened is, and you can kind of guess where I'm going with this. I notice how I said UK, and I might as well just cue the James Bond theme anytime I talk about UK, unless, by some small chance Batman and Superman are over there fighting for some reason. So, for you James Bond fans, I have good news and I have bad news, if you haven't heard already. So, it has been reported that Tom Hiddleston had a secret meeting with the James Bond filmmakers. So, Hiddelston was actually spotted having a meeting at the Soho House in London last night. And that's on Friday for those of you when you're listening to this. He apparently was meeting with director Sam Mendes and Barbara Broccoli. Now, it has been rumored for quite a while, or a lot of people were kind of hoping that, Hiddleston might be taking the mantle from Daniel Craig as the next James Bond. when we last heard, there's been reports that, Daniel Craig's going to come back. There's been reports that Daniel Craig, might not come back. He signed up for a Showtime miniseries or a series of some sorts. Going with what he said at the end of last year when Spectre was released, he was saying about, I'd rather slit my wrist than do another Bond movie. That can be taken a whole lot of different ways. And honestly, I still stick to this, that the guy was tired. He injured his leg pretty bad, actually, where he had to be flown back to New York to get surgery done on it. So the guy was pretty tired. He's getting up there in age, like it or not. I mean, and when I say getting up there in age, I say he's in his, let's see, I have to do a check on this. I think he's in his mid-40s, maybe mid to late 40s. For an actor that's doing action stunts, such as what a Bond movie does, it's got to be tough on your body. I mean, the running, the jumping and whatever else, the fighting. I mean, you saw how he was fighting Dave Bautista. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but that fight looked pretty real, all things considered. So that's got to take a beating on your body. And, before we talk more about Tom Hiddleston, the possibility of him being James Bond, let me say this about Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig is by far one of the best James Bond actors we've ever had. And those of you that want to argue about Sean Connery, I understand. I can hear where you're coming from. I can also say that, maybe if Sean Connery, had the storylines that Daniel Craig had, maybe that would change my opinion. But the stories that, the screenplays, if you will, that Daniel Craig has had to work with, they have been amazing. I mean, people can argue about Quantum of Solace if you want. I still think that, given the writer's strike that was going on at that time and just the story, it was mediocre. It was probably his weakest, but even his weakest was still a great Bond movie. And he brought his A game. How does James Bond react to the death of his loved one, and how does he kind of keep moving on with that? Daniel Craig brought his A game with that. And, say what you want, Spectre was an excellent Bond movie. It's not my favorite Daniel Craig James Bond movie. I will still say Casino Royale and Skyfall remain my favorite Daniel Craig James Bond movies. But Spectre, the more I watch it, the more I love it. So maybe one day when I go back and revisit, and I'll revisit it in November, maybe my opinion will change by then too. But, to say Daniel Craig has not had a good run, it's wow. 4 Bond movies and probably the highest grossing Bond movies given inflation, and everybody's a fan of this guy, all things considered. I mean, he was hated on for being, a blonde, because he doesn't look like a James Bond actor should. And, he doesn't have the brunette hair. He doesn't have, he's too muscular. He's too butch to play James Bond. Who knows? Whatever kind of reasons people had out there were so many, and you know who you are. So, if Daniel Craig were to leave and this is the end of the Daniel Craig era, I can live with that. I'm not excited about it, but, sometimes we have to move on. So let's talk a little bit about Tom Hiddleston. Now, the only work I've ever seen of Tom Hiddleston is in The Avengers, and he was playing Loki. He was playing a villain. Now, he had longer hair there. He had the brunette. He had brown hair. Now I think he's a blonde. I guess he just dyes his hair, as does every other actor out there. Does he look like James Bond? Let's talk about that. Yeah, sure, he looks like James Bond. I mean, I could see that. I mean, I need to see more of his work to, just make to make a good judgment about that. I know that a lot of people out there are pushing for Tom Hiddleston. A lot of people were pushing for Idris Elba. There is no, and I've said this before also, there is no person that has the look of James Bond. James Bond can be any actor, as can Batman. It just, can they pull off the part when they get on the big screen? That is what we have to determine. So when Hiddleston had talked last about James Bond, these rumors that were going out, he said, I think the rumors have come all because in The Night Manager I play a spy, and people have made the link. In this show, or in this miniseries, it's called The Night Manager. Hiddleston plays Jonathan Pine, a former soldier who's turned into intelligence operative. Haven't had a chance to see it. Like I said, I've only seen The Avengers, and I liked him as the bad guy in Avengers. I thought he did a good job with what he had to work with. He also added this. In fact, while he's never said he wouldn't take the role, he's getting a little tired of the speculation. quoted, "I feel like I just want to make it stop because I have no power over it, but that's what being famous is. You have no power over these people's opinions. People have strong opinions about Bond, and why shouldn't they? Because it's difficult to talk about because it's a completely unreal conversation in a way. It's just an idea in people's minds, so it's quite hard to engage with because it hasn't come from me, if that makes sense. It's odd because it's becoming overwhelming. Not the thing of it, but the number of people per day who bring it up. It's actually becoming a weird thing to deal with." So he's well aware of this, and I'm sure that, the producers, like I said, the power of social media, producers have a good idea of what the fans want. Now, I will say this, just because the fans are like crying for Tom Hiddleston or whomever to be James Bond doesn't mean that they always have to listen to him. I mean, they went, like we said, the opposite direction of what anybody would have ever predicted with Daniel Craig. So, I mean, this one is kind of interesting to me. It's like, okay, well, obviously if the producers are meeting with him, then, they've already thought about it. Maybe they saw his work before all this. I mean, maybe they said, hey, you know what? I like that guy in the Avengers. He played a great villain, but you know what? I think he would actually do better as James Bond. And, who knows? I mean, there could be, just because he met with the producers, I mean, it could be something, it could be nothing. We won't know yet, but, depending on when they want to get this next Bond movie, last time I heard it's going to be 2018. They usually like to have at least a 3-year gap, 2-3-year gap in between James Bond movies. So I would expect to hear something more sooner than later. So we will see. All right, before we get out of here, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that there are 2 big birthdays in the Bond universe this week. The first birthday is to Mr. John Glenn, best known for directing 5 James Bond films, including For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, A View to a Kill, The Living Daylights, and License to Kill. He also contributed to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, The Spy Who Loved Me, and Moonraker. Now, we also can't leave out his signature trademark, best known as the Startled Pigeon. For those of you that, are Batman fans, you might not know about this, and it wasn't John Woo who started this, it was actually John Glenn. The Startled Pigeon is what makes the actor and the audience jump, so this happened many times. The best one I can always think of is Octopussy, when he's kind of sneaking out of Octopussy's, her mansion, whatever you want to call it, her house, her digs, and he's trying to sneak outside the window, and then the birds just kind of fly right out. I know this happened in For Your Eyes Only, and I can't think about which scene it is. It's bogging my mind right about now. In The Living Daylights, I remember when he was trying to get into Brad, whatever his name is, Whitaker. Yeah, Brad Whitaker. He was trying to sneak into his place at the very end. Bond is very sneaky, by the way. But he was trying to sneak into Whitaker's house, and, he's communicating with Felix, and it's very, you have the classic John Barry, James Bond score, very orchestral, going in the background, and he's tapping his little earpiece there. Then all of a sudden he sneaks around the corner, and a little bird pops right out, and happens to be the pigeon. This also was used, and it's not a pigeon, but it was actually a cat that was used in A View to a Kill. If you remember back when he was once again, sneaking. He is so sneaky. He was sneaking into Stacy's mansion there, or her big, big house, and all of a sudden you hear the "Meow," and it was the cat that was coming down the stairway when he was trying to go up there. In Moonraker, this one you might not know about, he was responsible. Now, he didn't direct this movie, but he was very responsible for the double-taking bird. Now, this scene, it always gets me every time I see it, because that's when we know that James Bond was going maybe a little too out there, if you will. And, pardon the pun on that one when I say out there, because he really did go out of Earth. It was the double-taking bird, so he's kind of like on one of those, it looks like a gondola ride, or a gondola boat, and he, the driver of the gondola boat dies because he got a knife in by that other guy that was one of the henchmen that was just kind of coming around out of the coffin. Bond threw a knife back at him, and he went back into the coffin. But then he turns it into like that, I don't remember what the boat is called, but it was in Paris, I believe it was, or Italy. Man, I can't remember now. Anyway, so he's in Europe. Yeah, see, you guys can correct me. What's funny is, once I go back and listen to this, I'm going to think about it right away, and I'm going to be like, why didn't I think of that? My mind, I obviously have no excuse. But anyway, he was on that, he turned it into a motorized boat, and turns out into a little boat chase in there, but as he like turns it into kind of like a hovercraft as he's coming up onto land. The guy that drinking the wine, he's seen there. He's, kind of looks at his wine bottle as he's done for like the third Bond movie. And then all of a sudden you see a pigeon double take. And that was actually John Glenn that was responsible for that. Now, not many directors or even, cast and crew have the chance to contribute to as many Bond films as long as he did. If you go back and look at his work, I think it's sometimes forgotten how grounded his Bond movies are, especially my two favorites, For Your Eyes Only and License to Kill. So the interesting thing about For Your Eyes Only is that, going back to Moonraker, it's like, okay, the producers and so forth, they took James Bond to space. So how are you going to outdo space? Well, no one can outdo space, I don't think. I mean, if you want to throw him into an X-Wing, maybe that would be the next step. But, seriously, though, you can't. You have to bring him back to Earth. You have to have it more grounded. And that was probably the smartest thing that they ever decided to do. With For Your Eyes Only, which still remains one of my favorite Roger Moore James Bond movies. It's always between that and The Spy Who Loved Me. But with For Your Eyes Only, I liked how they brought it back to how it was, and it's very similar to From Russia with Love. And, it's the Russians versus the British, and they're after, Russia's after the Lecter system in From Russia with Love. In this one, they're actually after the ATAC submarine tracking system. And it even has a little bit of The Spy Who Loved Me in there, too. But, I mean, it's not so much like the underwater, of, two submarines and, global destruction. It's like, okay, what if the British government really did have this tracking system? And, especially at the time of the Cold War, it's an amazing story. Well, once again, that'll be in a review in a couple weeks, so I don't want to go too far into that, but I did like the approach that, John Glenn did with that. He kind of had, a little bit of even On Her Majesty's Secret Service in there, too. So, before I get carried away with that, I did want to mention, though, that even with movies like License to Kill, which I still say is one of the most underrated James Bond movies, John Glenn had one hell of a task to do in that year, 1989. Let's look at the movies that he was competing with when License to Kill came out. Lethal Weapon 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and the one I'm a sucker for, Batman 1989 with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. Those are some movies that I would not want to have my movie released at during that time because, just those names, they're sequels. One's not a sequel, though, but everybody knows the Batman name, and it's like, wow, how can you take James Bond against this? And this would be, of all times, and it just occurred to me at this time, this is really the closest we've ever had to Batman versus James Bond because they were released at the exact same time. But interesting tidbit. Also with the License to Kill, I also want to mention that this was also the first film not to be filmed in the UK, and they wanted to go with that darker, edgier tone, which I think we can clearly see is what led to the whole Casino Royale, Daniel Craig, Bond era. Anyway, many happy returns to you, John Glenn. Thank you for all you've done for Bond movies and film in general, sir. Now on to this next chap here. He still remains one of my favorite actors to portray James Bond. Yes, I'm talking about you, Mr. Pierce Brosnan. Now, a lot of you may not know the backstory to how Pierce Brosnan became James Bond. Some of you, might. Now, a lot of you might not know the backstory to how Pierce Brosnan became James Bond. Some of you not. For those of you that don't, the quick few minutes here, it all began on the set of For Your Eyes Only when Pierce Brosnan's then wife, Cassandra Harris, who played Countess Lizzle in there. Yeah, she's the one who got run down by the Doom Buggy when Roger Moore was, just after Roger Moore, shall we cleanly say, seduced her and used her for information. Brosnan was on the set and actually met with producer Albert R. Broccoli. And the funny thing about this was that Cubby made the remark during that time, if he can act, he's my guy to take on the next Bond after Roger Moore. Well, what happened is rumors came out. They were like all over like the news and Entertainment Tonight, whatever they were, kind of like right now aside from social media. So if you can imagine this, you have this actor who's a TV star. He was starring in Remington Steele, was a hit TV show during the 80s. One I never had a chance to check out because, side note, I'm a Knight Rider fan and Miami Vice fan, but that maybe that's why I'm a fan of James Bond in a way too. Anyway, now what had happened was that Brosnan was in contract renegotiations for Remington Steele. But at the same time, he was obviously trying to get on James Bond because, hey, everybody wants to play James Bond. And Cubby saw something, and, obviously the fans saw something too. So what had happened was, and I remember seeing this in an interview that, Brosnan was talking about, he's like, it was about to happen, it's almost a done deal. And then all of a sudden what happens? Well, his agent calls and tells him, Remington Steele, they want you back and you have to do it or else, and there's no way out of it. So they required him to be back on set and resume his role. So what had happened? Well, Timothy Dalton ended up getting the part, and he still went on to star in The Living Daylights and License to Kill. So after License to Kill, there were legal issues, there were distribution rights fiascos, there was all kinds of things going on. And if you remember, Bond was on hiatus for the longest time. So it was 1989 till 1995. You can do the math. And what was that, about 6 to 9 years almost? It's quite a long time anyway. So, everybody tried to figure out what's going on with James Bond. But in June 7th, 1994, Brosnan was announced to be the 5th actor to play James Bond. Now, when we look back at his James Bond career, I mean, obviously the one that stands out for me is always going to be GoldenEye, because if I haven't said it before, then GoldenEye is one of my top 5 favorite James Bond movies. It was the first James Bond movie I got to experience. I remember sitting over at my grandparents, hanging out there, and I sit in the recliner, I turned on a movie, and I don't know what it was, HBO, Showtime, one of the movie channels anyway, and I'm like, well, I've heard Dad talk about James Bond before. I know he's got the VHS tapes. Yes, I said VHS. VHS are, these oversized plastic things, the rectangular shape, and they came out before DVDs, CDs, and MP3s, kids. So look it up, Google it. Anyway, so I was like, all right, let me check out this Bond, see what it's all about. And it had just came out just a couple months before, or however long it took to get to the movie channels. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this. This is great. The cars, the action, the girls. It's just like, oh my God, this is amazing. So, of course, at the same time, the GoldenEye Nintendo 64 game came out. So my friends and I pretty much spent, I think 2 years in my parents' basement just playing nothing but that game, trying to get every level. But what I'm going with here is that, Pierce was my James Bond. And you'll hear a lot of people say that, just even same with Batman, that, they are the actor that kind of, whether it was your first Bond film or not, or first Batman film, they're the ones that kind of cemented in your head, just like when you think of that character, you think of that actor. And that's exactly what Pierce Brosnan is. I still see him, and I still watch a lot of his movies that come out, and he still does great. I saw The November Man. I saw I don't remember what the name of it was, but it had Selma Hayek in it, and it had Jessica Alba, and it was kind of like a comedy. And that's one thing that a lot of people didn't know about Pierce. I mean, it's you can kind of see it in the James Bond films, but he's got a very comedic side to him, and he seems very laid back. You can find him on social media. Like I said, GoldenEye still is one of my favorite Bond movies. It's not just because it's the first Bond movie I saw. I think it's just looking back, I just think that's a great template for a Bond movie. It has everything in there that you could want. It has the gadgets, has the girls, has the Aston Martin, has the, vodka martini, the name's Bond, James Bond, has all that in there, casino scenes. I mean, whatever. And a great villain in there. We'll get into 006 another day. Alex Trevelyan will have his day. Going on to Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day, I don't think they are as good. I think that the closest would be probably Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough. The World Is Not Enough looks like a BBC TV movie. A lot of people will say Tomorrow Never Dies is too, too jokey. It's too much like The Spy Who Loved Me, and Die Another Day is just, the best of Bond, and it's like a Bond remix, and it's just too much heavily on CGI. I do not blame Pierce Brosnan for that. I know, once again, in interviews, he talked about the kind of stories that he wanted to do. I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, he wanted to have the story with, Paris Carver in Tomorrow Never Dies as, for the first time, having Bond have an X in there, and you can kind of see when she died that he was, he did what he could to, saying, oh my God, I lost this one girl I loved, and, it was really tough. So, and in a way, that's the closest we ever saw to him having feelings, aside from GoldenEye when he had to go up against one of his best friends. But, once again, we'll get into the Bond movies, actual reviews, but I did want to highlight his birthday also. So many happy returns, Pierce, and thank you, sir. All right, moving on. So now time for an all-new segment that I call Versus. And you can imagine where I'm going to be going with this. So this is a new weekly segment that we're going to be doing here. Each week, what we're going to do is take a movie from the Batman or James Bond universe, and we're going to compare it versus, you see what I did there, versus another franchise or movie in the same wheelhouse. So for an example, we would take something from, say, James Bond, Quantum of Solace versus The Bourne Identity. And we're going to compare the similarities, what was the better movie almost, or what were the similarities, all kinds of stuff. So, we're going to probably make some tweaks in there, but I figured this is going to be kind of a lot of fun. And the reason is because we always say that James Bond and Batman, there's so many similarities out there with other franchises, and we all know who came first. No, I'm kidding there. I mean, it was always James Bond and Batman, but we won't tell the Marvel fans that. I'm kidding. Anyway, so this week's Versus is actually going to be an interesting one, mainly because the movie just came out. And, I'm not going to review this movie, but I am going to make some comparisons, and because it's all over the internet already anyway, and it's probably better we talk about it on here. That way, I get to share my opinion, and you guys can let me know about what you think about it also. All right, so this week's Versus is going to be none other than Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Captain America Civil War. Let's start off with this. This is not going to be a bashing of Captain America or any Marvel movies, okay? This is also not going to be a bashing of Batman v Superman, or, favoritism towards either of them, okay? I just want to make, that's why it's called Versus. We're going to make our comparisons. We'll list, whatever the similarities are. My opinion of maybe who did it better. I mean, like I said, I'm entitled to my opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. If you want your opinion, tweet me. Let me know what you think. So let's just start off with this. So the biggest thing with Captain America Civil War is that how it came about. With Captain America Civil War, and this comes straight from the directors and from the producers, Captain America Civil War is Iron Man versus Captain America. Two heroes fighting each other. Where do they get the idea? Batman v Superman. And this is true. This is not made up. Believe me. I'll send out the article. I'll tweet it out for you guys who don't believe me. Now, a lot of you are going to be saying, well, Batman versus Superman was such an epic fight because it's the first time we've ever seen Batman and Superman on screen together. Agreed. I agree with you 100% on that because, we've been teased this so many times. It's been in the comic books. It was in I Am Legend where they put the poster of the Batman versus Superman logo on there, and that was all the way back in 2008. Now, Captain America Civil War, will we say they got the idea obviously from Batman v Superman, and we've heard, I know at least, in the comics, it's always been, Captain America versus Iron Man. They'll take sides and so forth, but it's all about the fight. And that's more what I want to analyze with this. So, when it came down to, and spoiler alert for any of you that haven't seen any of these movies, they've been out for a little over a week and a month too. So when it comes down to this, the storylines in general, even before we get to the fight, it's all about, you have two heroes, and each hero is trying to get their cause in there. And they're fighting for a purpose, okay? Batman is obviously out to, he's out to, fight injustice, and, he does that, and he kills people, at least in the Batman v Superman movie. He thinks that Superman poses a threat, and he thinks that he's this alien who's going to cause nothing but devastation into Earth. And then you have Superman who thinks that, this bad vigilante, he's like a one-man reign of terror. And, he's got to be stopped, and, he's, putting his mark on bad guys and so forth. And, like I said, he's also killing people. Whereas in Captain America Civil War, it's all about this act. And it's about the government trying to control the heroes, or the Avengers. And, like I said, I don't want this to be so much getting into a review of Captain America, but I kind of have to talk about it just a little bit here. So it's about, Iron Man thinks, okay, well, we need to be put in check. We need to follow this act, and the government needs to kind of step in and just kind of say, because we've, created all this destruction across the world, whether it's been New York and whatever other cities they've been in, too many loss of civilian casualties has happened. So, we need to sign this act, and we need to follow what the government is saying. Whereas you have Captain America saying, well, no, we shouldn't have to answer to a government, and we should just be able to do kind of what we want. And at the same time, he's also trying to protect his friend Bucky Barnes. Now, the big theme with both of these movies, and it's becoming to be a big a secondary plot, if you will, about civilian casualties in movies. And that's really what I want to talk about with this. It's also another big theme of these movies, not just the fight between the two heroes. It's been about civilian casualties, and each of these movies really addresses it. And I think it's because a lot of what happened with Man of Steel, how a lot of people were, the fans and, viewers were outraging because Superman destroyed a city, and, all these, innocent civilians died, and he kind of just went off and ended up in a happy ending. Whereas you have Batman v Superman that addresses this issue. Same thing with Captain America. So, it's the problem of the hero goes to try to save the day, but unfortunately, innocent people die because of the villain, or because there was, it was the hero, tried to be fancy, or just, got too caught up in the moment. And unfortunately, that's what happened with Superman. Unfortunately, that's what happened with the Avengers. I won't say that it's right for what they did. I'm just saying that, it's interesting how these issues are being addressed now, especially in both movies. And both of these movies have four strong superheroes, and it all ends up coming to a battle at the very end. Now, it's all about, which battle was better. Some will say, okay, Captain America and Iron Man are second tier, and, however they fought, it wasn't what it should have been, or it was amazing. It was so much better than Batman v Superman. The story was better. Batman versus Superman, it was all about Lex Luthor trying to get them to fight, and that's what it ended up being. And the story sucked, but, Lex Luthor got these guys. He kidnapped Martha Kent. Martha! Don't say her name. I'm kidding. Had to throw that in there. Now, with both these movies, it also ends up being about the big fight leading up to the end. It ends up about having these superheroes being almost like puppets. And, that's where they're really similar, because they have these two villains that are secretly in the background. You have Baron Zemo, who was in Captain America, and he had his reasons for doing what he did. And, I won't go into that too much. You had Lex Luthor, who, whatever reason he had, was trying to pin Batman versus Superman. So you have these villains that are kind of sitting sideline. They're trying to get the heroes to fight. And it was really interesting when I saw Captain America. I'm like, wow, this is very, very similar to Batman v Superman. Civilian casualties. The heroes have to answer for this. You have a villain who's causing the heroes to battle when they have no idea that this was supposed to happen. And, it just ends up being in this big battle, and, ends up maybe not so much a happy ending. So when I say versus, it's an interesting one, because it's always going to come down to whether Marvel did better or DC did it better. I'm not going to say which one did it better. In my opinion, you can say what you want. I can say that the story structure of Captain America was a little bit better than Batman versus Superman. We know why the bad guy, the villain, Baron Zemo, kind of had his reasoning for, putting, Captain America versus Iron Man. We know why Iron Man was outraged with Captain America also, because the Winter Soldier killed his parents. With Batman v Superman, it's a little different. Batman is driven by rage. He's driven by all these casualties because Wayne Tower got demolished, by Gotham City being destroyed, by Superman coming to town. He's worried that this alien's going to cause destruction and kill even more people. Superman is just more kind of slowly kind of questioning what his purpose is. He has Lex Luthor on his ass, who kidnaps his mom, and there was too many elements with that. So given that, I will say Captain America Civil War at least had a better setup with the fight. There was more leading up to it. With Batman v Superman, it was just, we had the whole Batman story, which was, it was rushed, but it was really good. The Superman, it wasn't so much set up why he's trying to find out about, Bruce Wayne, or by Batman. So given that, I will say that, this versus, it would probably be Captain America winning. Like I said, that's my opinion about the movie. That's just me. I'm not saying that, I love the movie. I don't love the movie. I mean, I enjoyed it. At the same time, had Batman v Superman not happened, then I wonder if we would have ever had a Captain America Civil War movie. I wonder if the two main characters would have ever fought. Sadly enough, I mean, this has been the comic book movie season, and sadly enough, there's a lot of things going out there right now about superhero fatigue. And I won't say that there's superhero fatigue, but it is very interesting that after a month after Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, that, Captain America Civil War came out. That was planned a while back. However, the box office wasn't quite what, Captain America, at least the studio was projecting. Projections were going out there for $200 million. It got about ballpark $181 million. A lot of people are saying it's because of Batman v Superman. Oh, 2 more superheroes fighting again. Great, let's go see this. Maybe I don't want to see it. That does happen a lot, and I'm sure you've noticed. This is a really bad analogy here, but when we had the movies about when we had movies such as, say, Armageddon and Deep Impact, it happens all the time. 2 of the same types of movies that come out almost back to back. Whoever ends up getting their movie out first ends up usually winning. It all comes down to, like I said, who can get their movie out faster and, and how the fans are going to react to it. So, it's a lot of people say that, Marvel needs DC to do good, DC needs Marvel to do good. And this is a prime example of it. If, we can't say we should blame Batman v Superman for Civil War. Civil War did really good. All things considered, Batman v Superman did, but not as well as expectations could have been. You also have a little movie called Deadpool that came out, and it was little by any stretch of the means. Maybe it had a low budget, but compared to these other 2 movies, yeah, it beat them to the punch. And as a matter of fact, it was a rated R superhero movie and the highest grossing rated R movie to date. And once again, superhero movie. So a lot of people say, okay, we've had Deadpool in February. We had Batman v Superman in March. April, May, you've had Captain America Civil War, and then soon you still have X-Men coming out. Then you have Suicide Squad, and there's a lot of comic book movies out there, and that's just how it is right now. I mean, comic book movies are the big thing. They are the blockbusters that are out there. Sorry, I forgot Ninja Turtles. That's right, it is based on a comic. Shame on me. Now, as we wrap this up about the whole superhero fatigue stuff, I think it's crap. I really do. I think that the box office speaks well enough in itself that we've had this long run of DC movies, or especially Marvel movies, and there's all different kinds of superhero genres that are coming out. So I know that director Steven Spielberg even made a comment once that, superhero movies are going to be like Westerns. They're going to be a thing of the past sooner or later. I disagree with that, even though I really highly respect him. I don't think superhero movies are going anywhere. Obviously, if their movies are too much alike, then maybe that will hurt the latter. But in the meantime, I think it's just going to be, you're going to see a lot of these kind of similarities between movies, and it's comics. Unfortunately, there's always going to be something that's one's like the other and so forth. So anyway, that's the versus of the week. And now, moving into the final segment of the show, it's called the Matchup of the Week. So here I take 2 different characters from the Batman and James Bond movie universes, and you guys are going to decide who wins. Last week's matchup was Christian Bale, who played Batman in Batman Begins, versus Daniel Craig, who played James Bond in Casino Royale. Now, when I put the Twitter poll up this week, gotta say I was very surprised about who you guys picked out there. And, what I do is I put up the Matchup of the Week after I talk about the show. I post it on Twitter, and I put it up there. I'll probably put it up for a couple of days longer so you guys can get your vote in. So make sure you cast in your vote. That way I can let you know next week. So it ended up being, in an upset, Christian Bale beat Daniel Craig, 63% to 37%. Very interesting, I must say, because I know Christian and I talked about it last week, about saying how Batman is still kind of learning, James Bond, Daniel Craig is still kind of learning, but maybe it's the suit. Maybe you guys feel that, maybe Batman has more technology that he can use. Maybe Daniel Craig didn't have the gadgets like he did in the future Bond movies. And, I'm very surprised, but I mean, I would say that I would have gone 50-50 or that. It could have gone either way, but it wasn't quite a knockout. So this week's matchup is going to be an interesting one for you guys. Instead of going more the hero route, I decided to go more the villain route. So for you James Bond fans out there, we have Fiona Volpe, I think that's how you say her name, from Thunderball. Yes, she played probably one of the first villainesses in actual movie history, at least in the James Bond movie history, that is, versus Xenia Onatopp from GoldenEye. Now, we always love a good cat fight here. We've had it before. Both of these ladies are very skilled professional killers, if you will. While Fiona loves to drive fast on, a hot summer night with James Bond as her passenger, and Xenia Onatopp, on the other hand, sometimes enjoys a late night at the spa, and sometimes, as James Bond likes to say, she always did enjoy a good squeeze. Now, I honestly think I'm going to lean on the side of Xenia Onatopp. I think just because I'm a slight bigger fan of Xenia Onatopp, because she was one of the first Bond girls I ever had a chance to experience in a Bond movie, GoldenEye being that. I was like, wow, this is really, you don't want to mess with this chick at the same time. God, she is really gorgeous. So, and Fiona was a great Bond villainess. She was very rough, if you will, in bed. So I'm going to post that matchup on Twitter. Let me know what you think, and we will talk about the results next week. So, that about wraps it up for this episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. Please subscribe on iTunes and or Spreaker. Make sure that you rate this show, 5-star review, leave me some nice comments on there. I'd very much appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Batman vs. Bond and like me on the Batman vs. James Bond Facebook page. Also have an Instagram page out there, Batman vs. Bond. If you are interested in being a guest on the show, please direct message me and we can set something up. Like James Bond, I will return. Thank you for listening. Until next week, peace out.